Welcome. It's a packed house. We're thrilled to have you here on this Saturday morning. And I am going to get right into the 2020 goals that Jeff spoke to and that are outlined in the fund's annual report that I'd like all of you to pick up before you go. It's well worth reading. Of course, I'm going to say that because it is. Let's take it from the top. There are four of them. The first is no new invasives enter Lake George. Not by 2020, not ever. The second, Lake George provides the nation's best practices model for reducing salt use. I would argue we're already doing that ahead of our 2020 milestone. Third, we lead the nation in management of wastewater and stormwater effectively. And fourth, we serve as the global example to inform sustained protection of freshwater ecosystems. And I want to point out, as Jeff mentioned, that these goals are backed by hard target milestones. So we're not shooting from the hip trying to make this happen. We are very rigorously following a set of objectives and a path to lasting protection. And it is built on this fusion of partnership, innovation, and investment. That is what makes this tick. That is what makes this go at speed, at the speed of business, because if we're going to protect Lake George, we got to move fast. Chris is going to update you on the fund model in action along with myself, and I'm going to hit some of the highlights here, starting with invasive species. The fund has invested over $660,000 in prevention and preemption to realize the goal. We now have the strongest prevention program east of the Mississippi. This was largely a product of a unique partnership that we created here. The Save Lake George partnership, if you've been in past meetings or read the Mirror and the Chronicle, other papers, this was a partnership that was created and organized by the fund of municipal leaders and private interest, including the LGA and the fund, that proved to be the linchpin for implementation of the program. And it was SAVE's commitment to co-funding the program with New York State that made the difference. I'm proud to say this co-funding continues to this day. As depicted in this slide, since the program was founded in 2014, we have inspected, the Park Commission has, and/or as needed, decontaminated over 140,000 boats. That's a very big deal. And this is a tribute to the Lake George Park Commission, so ably run by Dave Wick, the Park Commission's executive director. We have some of the commissioners in the room as well, including Joe Stanek and Jim Neshaw. If I miss anyone, my apologies, and chaired by Bruce Young. Without them, we would not have the successful program we have in place now. And most important, we have seen no new aquatic invasives, I'm going to knock on wood, since that time, since this program was put in place. Yet, here's the flip side of the story. This map shows that we are surrounded by source waters, as they're known, with orders of magnitude more aquatic invasives. And this is why we can't only prevent invasives, forming this protection around the lake at the shores, but we have to go beyond. We need defense and offense if we're serious about winning the war. And make no mistake, not to sound like Chicken Little, but we are in a war with invasive species. They are determined to get in. Our success at Lake George catalyzed the Adirondack-wide program, invasives program funded by New York State, which now has 28 inspection and decontamination stations region-wide, in addition to the 6 at Lake George. So we have formed this vital ring of protection, if you will, to protect our waters and surrounding waters in the years ahead. Last month's opening, and this was a landmark achievement, of the inspection station along I-87, the Adirondack Northway that many of you or all of you traveled, at the new exit 18 rest area is just a huge achievement. And if you look at who's funded this, from the Nature Conservancy to the state DOT, to the Department of Environmental Conservation, to the Fund for Lake George, that's what's made it happen, partnership. This has provided us with a solid foothold for preempting invasives from reaching our shores, also for advocating mandatory inspections statewide, as is currently required and has been with the Lake George program, and as is urgently needed to keep invasives out. And the terrestrial invasives threat is no less serious. And what I will say on that front is we are working with our regional and state partners to tackle this very tough challenge. Moving on to salt reduction and our goal of having the nation's best practices model for reducing salt use, leveraging our success on invasives, the fund created and mobilized the Lake George Salt Reduction Initiative. We've invested more than $520,000 since launching the program, working with our municipal partners to implement best practices basin-wide, and that is happening. As just one example, and it's a great one, it's a heartening one, of the results already achieved, the town of Lake George has already reduced its salt use by over 30% per year. It's the first municipality ever to be awarded SWIM certification, that's Sustainable Winter Management certification, for this achievement. And as Supervisor Dickinson will tell us, that's over 3 tractor-trailer loads less salt applied to our roads every year in the town of Lake George alone. My turn for a sip. We're also really pleased to report that the state DOT has come aboard, which is a major step. For those who don't know, DOT maintains Route 9N, which hugs the western shore of Lake George, probably the most heavily traveled roads, certainly the most heavily salted road along the shore. You all traveled it unless you came by boat. You know the road I'm talking about. So that's a great next step in protecting our waters from salt. And then our annual salt summits. These have been fantastic. I can't say enough about them. Organized by the fund, these bring together such a mix of actors, from plow drivers to highway superintendents to town supervisors to the state DOT and businesses. As Jeff mentioned, led by our Council of Business Advisors, we'll be engaging regional businesses as needed. Why? Because half of the salt problem, up to half of the salt problem, occurs in the private sector. So we need businesses aboard, and the leadership at Lake George is going to help us complete the circle in reducing the use. The summits have become so popular, as noted here, that our next one is in Lake Placid on October 3rd. We invite anybody who wants to come to see it in action. It's a lot of fun. It's because we want to share our progress, expand our network of partners, which is already underway with Chris's leadership, and really spread the news about how this is getting done. Now on to water quality and clarity. You know, this is really, as Chris will take us deeper into, this is the fund's largest investment being made to date, nearly $3 million, and with good reason. It's the most costly and complex set of problems to be solved, reducing wastewater and stormwater pollution. As one highlight, and it's a wonderful one, and we're thrilled to have Supervisor Conover here with us from the town of Bolton. The fund provided a $50,000 grant to the town of Bolton for the wood chip bioreactor now in place, constructed with that money, to reduce nitrate pollution. This is the first ever municipal application of this innovative technology anywhere, if not in the country, if not in the world, certainly in the country, for wastewater treatment. Our investment and work with the town of Bolton triggered $1 million in state grants to the town for upgrading their wastewater treatment plant. Huge accomplishment. Why is it particularly important? Because upgrading that plant tops the state list of projects to help prevent a harmful algal bloom in Lake George. For those who don't know, harmful algal blooms are toxic. and deadly. The fund also served as lead catalyst, and continues to do so, to replace the failing wastewater treatment plant at Lake George Village, also on the state's short list of HAB projects, HAB prevention projects. HABs are harmful algal blooms, obviously. This plant is the largest source of nitrate pollution in the basin. It has to be replaced, and this has been the initial focus of our Council of Business Advisors, first in a letter to the governor calling for state funding to close the funding gap and get this $24 million plant built ASAP. It also included joint testimony by the fund and one of our business advisors, Ed Bartholomew from the Warren County Economic Development Corporation, at state budget hearings in Albany, where we were recognized by Assemblyman Dan Steck. And I want to show you a brief video clip of Dan speaking to the unique nature of our testimony.
Thanks, Chairman. I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity. Both Mr. Bartholomew and Mr. Sire, constituents of mine. Lake George resides in my assembly district, and I just want to highlight, first, I agree with both of them, and I'd like to take this opportunity to point out it's not often that you have economic developers sitting literally elbow to elbow with environmental leaders, and they are in lockstep on this and many other issues.
So that was a highlight. Moving on to the other dimension of wastewater, on-site septic systems. We have over 6,000 of them in the basin. It is an intensifying threat. Chris will speak to some of the innovations we're using to identify priority areas where we need to focus inspection efforts and determine whether replacements are needed. This includes the Town of Lake George Septic Initiative, a partnership with the town, funded by the state DEC, where we produced a powerful new tool to identify these priority areas. And this systematic approach is now being scaled for use basin-wide. Pollution from stormwater runoff is even harder to solve. It's cited by the US EPA as the nation's largest source of water quality problems. Why? It's very difficult to regulate, nearly impossible. Among the fund's signature innovations is the LID certification, Low Impact Development Certification Program, that empowers property owners to protect the lake and their property values. What a combination, right? It uses a point-based approach, awarding natural stormwater management practices similar to LEED certification for energy-efficient buildings. It's really taking off this year, as we're going to hear about from Chris, working with towns to establish LEED-certified communities as pilots for adoption basin-wide. Both wastewater and stormwater pollution feed the risk of this, a toxic or a harmful algal bloom, as mentioned, spurred by excessive nutrient loading. Imagine, if you will, the waters of Lake George looking like this pea soup or paint green. You wouldn't want to swim in it. You certainly wouldn't want to drink it or boat in it. And I'm not, again, Chicken Little, but the risk is real. We have yet to experience a harmful algal bloom in Lake George, but our lake is one of 12 lakes in the New York State Harmful Algal Bloom Initiative, launched in late 2017. The HABs Action Plan that you're seeing the cover of lists priority projects, including those 2 wastewater projects that I mentioned earlier, to reduce the risk. Several HABs lakes have sent delegations to Lake George after hearing our presentations at HABs summits in other parts of the lake state, last year. And it includes Skinny Atlas Lake, and I think Frank Moses from the Skinny Atlas Lake Association, the new executive director, is here. Skinny Atlas was one of the lakes that came to us. We came to them. We're going to hear more about the Skinny Atlas experience shortly. They want to replicate the science to solutions approach, this path we have forged at Lake George, and in particular, Chautauqua Lake. Chautauqua is the worst of the 12. While we may be the best, again, knock on wood, Chautauqua's experienced the most severe and regular harmful algal blooms. So they have a lot to learn, and they're highly motivated to do so. Export of the model strengthens the fund's influence in securing dedicated public resources and policies to help ensure lasting success in protecting Lake George. This is vital to hitting and reaching those 2020 goals. So without further ado, it's now my great pleasure to introduce our award-winning, one and only waterkeeper, Chris Navitsky, to show how our pace-setting progress is being made. Chris.
Got to lower that. Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everyone. And thank you all for your continued support for our work. And I'm truly honored to be your waterkeeper. I would like to quickly detail how we are achieving our 2020 goals and milestones. And we'll start with our road salt reduction initiative. The road to reduction starts with implementation of best practices and calibration training. Here you see trainings with the village and with the town of Hague. It is vital that we ensure reduction by accurately knowing how much salt is being spread, but this also engages the towns to take ownership of their equipment and also diagnose their own equipment. Our consultants are now comfortable with several of the municipalities to program the trackers, which is another best practice measurement. We now have 23 municipal trucks around the basin tracking salt every 20 seconds throughout the watershed. Cameras were added for analysis of salt application data, and as you are able to witness here through a video of time-lapse images from an event, we can view the relationship of application rates in real time to the actual road conditions to determine the effectiveness of our rates. We can compare different trucks to different routes during different events and take into account specific weather conditions, temperature, moisture, storm intensity, to determine the actual level of service or the time it takes to get to bare road conditions. We know the towns are using these images to determine when to start operations as well as when to self-assess their own application rates. These images also demonstrate the effectiveness of different equipment, such as the live edge plow. This is shown in the photo on the right that captured a live edge plow in action. When you compare that to the photo on the left, which was a different truck route with a different truck without a live edge plow, you can see the difference in the snow remaining on the road, which prevents it from building up to ice on the surface. This process we have implemented provides a framework for superintendents and staff to review their operations, their application rates, and determine their levels of service so that they can come up with standard operating procedures, as we have done in meetings shown here with the town of Lake George, Warren County DPW, and here with the town of Hague. The towns now start to take ownership of these numbers, of the data, and use it to form policies for a data-backed approach. This is demonstrated in these graphs for a specific route in the town of Hague, with application rates shown along the bottom graph increasing left to right. As we compare several storm events, the peak bars shift to the left, indicating decreased application rates while achieving the same road conditions. Through our data-backed approach, towns with inconsistent rates, as demonstrated by the varying bars on this graph, can apply policies and to become more consistent rates. Through this approach, we can reduce road salt application, indicated here in red, and this will result in subsequent savings. Now on to how we address water quality and clarity from stormwater and wastewater, which is evident through the increased algae growth that has been observed throughout the lake. Regarding municipal wastewater, we are proud to announce that our largest grant, Water Quality and Clarity Grant of 2018, went to the town of Bolton for the wood chip bioreactor construction pilot project at their wastewater treatment plant, shown here to reduce high nitrates. Initial results of our monitoring every 2 weeks indicate significant reductions in nitrates, well above what we've seen in other research. This will greatly reduce the nutrients entering Lake George. The fund has several initiatives to reduce the nutrient impact from on-site septic systems and aid in the replacements of aging legacy systems that you see on the left, and replace them with more efficient systems such as the peat filter system that is shown on the right photo. Our application of biomonitoring, or the identification of specific algae associated with organic pollution as an indicator of problematic septic systems, has been recognized in a national industry magazine, shown on the left. On the right, you may have trouble seeing us in the lake sampling algae of concern. The North Queensbury Wastewater Management Disposal District demonstrates our model of partnership, innovation, and investment. With nearly $150,000 in grants to replace 15 septic systems, results of our monitoring illustrates where systems have been replaced, indicated with parcels in green. There has been a corresponding reduction in the specific algae of concern, indicated with the blue check marks. Contrary, where older systems exist, indicated in red, we have observed an increase in organic pollution indicators with the red exclamation points. Our work has catalyzed important regulations for septic system inspection programs by the town of Queensbury and the town of Bolton, and was cited in press editorials in the Post-Star supporting such water quality protection measures. Our largest project over the past year was the completion of our final report for the town of Lake George septic program, which is an analysis of the management of on-site wastewater treatment systems of over 500 parcels in the town in close proximity to the lake and to tributary streams. The centerpiece of this report was the creation of an algorithm to help the town identify and prioritize management options. This algorithm generated 3 databases to incorporate factors impacting on-site treatment. The first, site suitability, including factors such as depth to groundwater and soil hydrologic conditions. Second, being the evaluation of existing systems, including the assessment of system components such as cesspools and system maintenance or the pumping out of septic tanks. The third being the algae biomonitoring. These 3 databases were merged through GIS, resulting in prioritization mapping. On these maps, green is good and red is bad. So where there were areas of red on the land, and you see the red circles in the lake from our algae sampling, these indicated priority areas for septic system management. The report resulted in a list of 10 priority areas in the town and provided recommendations on management and regulatory actions, as well as funding. You can see a copy of this at our website. Regarding stormwater, we are excited to have the LID certification program guide the way for nutrient reduction by working with nature, not altering, to improve water quality, creating more sustainable communities. We are working to create LID certified communities, focusing on the towns of Queensbury and the town of Bolton, who consistently cite incorporating low-impact design standards in their recently adopted local waterfront revitalization program. Queensbury's recent regulatory updates reflecting LID certified standards will be recognized later in the program with the Waterkeepers Langmuir Award for Excellence in Stewardship. We are creating existing and build-out scenarios, shown here for the town of Bolton, and applying runoff and nutrient models to determine nutrient loadings to the lake that will be calibrated and verified with our own field monitoring. We will then run models implementing LID certification standards to justify the benefits of low-impact development through nutrient reduction for the towns. It is through LID certification, as well as other initiatives just detailed, that the fund will lead the way for long-term protection of Lake George and prevent devastating impacts such as harmful algal blooms. I want to thank you, and now I'd like to welcome back Eric Sy.
So I had mentioned the 4 goals at the top. Last but certainly not least, by no means, in fact, Science of solutions is the tie that binds. It puts headlights on the problems and their solution. Chris spoke to some of the work that's being done on this front. And the fund has invested $2.6 million nearly since 2013 because the science is so important in world-leading scientific research and technology that guides our progress, and I think most importantly tracks the results we're realizing to create this feedback mechanism that reinforces commitment. And the centerpiece of all of this, as we're about to hear, is the Jefferson Project at Lake George, our historic partnership with IBM and RPI. As Dr. John Kelly will show us, and as I just said, this does put eyes on the problems and their solution as never before. I want to thank you. Again, we couldn't do any of this work without your support, without your commitment. The number of people in this room demonstrates just how concerned people are about Lake George and the fate of this magnificent, priceless resource. Thank you very much.